If you've ever thought to yourself, I'd rather just read about this than actually do it, you're not alone. The Enneagram 5 newsletter exists to help you move from knowing to experiencing. Every Saturday, you'll get insights designed to help fives grow without overwhelm. Sign up for free today at enneagram5.com/newsletter or visit the link in the description. Now on to the show.
You know, I have no idea how we're going to start this one.
Yeah.
All right. Cue the intro. Okay, so we are having a little fun with this one.
Yeah.
Outside of the norm, a little bit of what we've been doing.
We're talking about a lot of serious things.
A lot of serious things, telling some stories, but I wanted to take a break from that for a minute. And we are very much against typing other people.
Yes.
And especially in public. But
or in people's comments or
yeah,
online.
or in people's comments on Facebook and Instagram. But it's fun to type or attempt to type fictional characters.
Yes.
And because they're not real people, that's okay.
And they're supposed to be caricatures anyway most of the time, so it's totally fine.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is when they're portrayed in, TV and film and art, the idea is that you're supposed to get to know them based on what is displayed.
Yeah.
One of my big pet peeves about typing other people is that you can only type them based on their actions and the things that they say.
Right.
But their motivations, their fears, their desires aren't that obvious. You can't really know for sure what's going on internally. For you to type someone else without their permission and involvement, at its best can be arrogant.
Yeah.
At its worst can be really damaging. So we are instead going to talk about today some of our favorite fictional fives.
Gotta love alliteration. Yeah.
I feel like you can't not start with the most obvious five.
Sherlock.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I can see that he's on both of our lists as the first one.
Like when I think about, I do think that he's a quintessential five, but it's not just that, it's that he's so iconic and has been around for so long. When you think of fives, or when I think of fives, I think Sherlock first, usually.
There could be an argument made that the different portrayals of Sherlock are not always a 5.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
Like Benedict Cumberbatch, definitely a 5.
Yeah.
The book version of Sherlock, definitely a 5. Well, for the most part. I guess there's been multiple authors of Sherlock over the years. So
Robert Downey Jr.
Not a 5.
Yeah, not as much. Yeah.
Probably. Well, you could argue that he was an unhealthy 5, maybe integrating to 7.
Yeah, I guess I could see that.
I don't know.
It's been so long since I've seen that version of Sherlock Holmes. As soon as we saw the show Sherlock,
we forgot about everybody else who played Sherlock. There's only one.
Benedict.
Old Cumberbatch.
Oh, man.
And the Mind Palace, everything about it is so, and I think it's also probably very idealistic. It's like that's everything I wish I was.
Absolutely. Yes. I wish that I was so incredibly good at something that it didn't care how much of an asshole I was.
Yes. Yes. 100% that. I wish I was so good at something that I could be my complete, unadulterated, unfiltered self, and people just had to deal with it.
Yep.
That I really wish that. Which I guess, I don't know how quick you want to go through this list, but that kind of brings me to my next character. Okay. Gregory House.
Of course. Yeah. It's like it's basically Sherlock of the medical world.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely Sherlock Holmes. I know they even do so many parallels in the show to Sherlock Holmes. With Watson and Wilson, and it's all the things.
So similar.
Yeah, Watson had a limp, but then House had a limp.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing because with House, he has this affliction. And I guess that's kind of the point of House. I was going to say, Sherlock doesn't necessarily have it, but Sherlock has his own affliction, which is that he gets bored and destructive, which I can also definitely relate to.
Completely.
And I was just thinking, House has this physical manifestation of that. His physical affliction is actually a physical manifestation of that, right? I think that's what the conclusion we come to in that show. Is a lot of the pain that he experiences from that is more psychosomatic than he wants to admit or or believe. Or, yeah. But it's still the same kind of affliction of feeling separate when you're kind of intellectually above everyone else, or at least perceive yourself to be. It's really hard to relate to people. It's really hard to actually have healthy relationships.
Yeah, well, and even in the show, we're working our way back through that show. I've realized
I can't watch it anymore.
I've watched it like 7 times. But it's funny.
So depressing.
At a point, but I love that kind of stuff. There's a point in my life, though, where I don't know how I did it, but I kind of outgrew the show, I think, emotionally.
Right.
So I watch it back now, and I think how terrible it is, like acting-wise.
Oh,
like I don't, there's so much, the first half of the show, I don't actually believe House's emotions or his quick, witty comebacks and stuff. It feels over the top. It feels very much like, I don't know, a USA type show, like, like Psych or, things that are just over the top, actually, not realistic.
I really love Psych. But I
like Psych too, but it's a different kind of show.
Yeah, it's a different kind of show.
You're getting into like a cartoony situation that's not even remotely realistic and also really corny, right?
Yeah.
So, but House was not really supposed to be that way. And season 6 on takes a very different turn. And I think from season 6, especially episode 1, season 6, if for anybody who hasn't seen it and wants to watch, is a really, really great portrayal of a 5 hitting bottom and having to come back up and figure out what health looks like. And does he ever figure it out? No, not really. But but he tries. And there's a point where when we're going to assume, I'm going to go ahead and say spoilers for anybody who hasn't watched House. But if you have watched it, we should probably just go ahead and say spoilers.
Spoilers
period.
for anything, yeah.
If we start talking about a character, assume there's going to be spoilers you might want to skip.
Otherwise, this conversation is just not going to be very fun.
Yeah. So with House, season 6 is when the drugs finally take its toll and he goes to rehab, the real rehab.
Okay.
And it gets very, very real. And he tries to buck the system and integrates to 7, or disintegrates rather, to 7 over and over and over again, to the point to where he is playing fast and loose with other people's lives just for his own entertainment and enjoyment.
Yeah.
All the way to the point that somebody kills themselves and it's his fault.
Yep.
Yeah.
Chaotic destruction.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. And the fact that he always thinks that he needs the drugs because he goes back to being unhappy and unmiserable. And everybody keeps trying to tell him around him, you were miserable before you had the drugs.
Right.
It has nothing to do with the drugs. And so, I think that's all of his telltale signs of trying to regress back into his old ways is all just him misinterpreting his unhealthy behavior and not wanting to deal with it and deflecting to other things, which I understand. Done that a lot in my life. So there was points in my life where I related a little too much to House. And now I look back and I see it as my past self. So maybe it's like I literally emotionally outgrew it.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I said the reason I can't really watch the show now is I feel like I don't, before I kind of idealized him and, related to him, and I don't feel that way anymore. And now it feels, it's not that I don't like dark things, because I do, but it feels unnecessarily hopeless, if that makes sense. I'm watching this person essentially torture themselves because they can't gain the perspective that they need.
Well, and they don't think they deserve anything good.
Right. That's part of it, for sure.
I mean, part of the whole thing and part of perspective, what you're saying, I guess, is like he constantly thinks that he deserves everything he gets.
Yep.
And make sure that he earns the bad things.
Yeah. And so I used to feel that way.
Yeah.
And I don't anymore. And so like going back and watching that, there's really no interest in it for me.
You know what's crazy to me too is like, if you think about just kind of a side note, the person who created House also created The Good Doctor, which is the same kind of show, but the opposite.
I haven't watched that. The same kind of show, but the opposite. What does that mean?
So it's a doctor who's also a genius, but he has Asperger's, I think.
Okay.
And he is like the saint and angel of all people, but they all also kind of have to let him do his thing in the way that he does it, because he does it differently than everybody else. He's more of like a savant.
Okay.
But he's also really young. He's the youngest doctor to ever finish med school, blah, 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 etc. And
Doogie Howser.
yeah, kind of. It's a Doogie Howser, but like with good, dark, moody lighting and very similar house vibes. And even like a weird, like, I don't know, it's just strange. The whole thing, it feels very much like House, but like the opposite side of the same coin in that way of like, it's really uplifting and positive. And so much so that I couldn't watch it also because of that reason. I was like, this is too happy for me. It's too corny. It's an ABC show. So
okay, that makes sense.
I went from Fox to ABC.
Yeah.
If I saw myself as a fictional character, I would have to say it would be Ross Geller. I'm very disappointed in that because Ross is very annoying with all of his knowledge and sharing and the facts that he must tell everyone everything he knows about dinosaurs. And I'm like that with the Enneagram. It's like, give me as much knowledge of this Enneagram stuff that I can possibly get and let me help you with your life. You'll be such a better person if you just know your numbers. So yeah, probably Ross Geller. And if you've noticed, Ross Geller only has 5 other friends that he ever associates with. And that would be me. I only have so many friends that I let into my life fully. I do have friends, but they're not my bestie friends that know everything about me. There's a lot of boundaries to cross to get to know me, and I suspect that's the way it is with Ross Geller. Because if it wasn't, he and Rachel, despite the fact that it was a television show, he and Rachel would have been able to communicate better, but Ross wouldn't let her into his, what I call castle, his mind castle, actually. And the other one I relate to is Sherlock Holmes. I really like Sherlock. I am that person. I like to figure things out, those clues. I like to be alone. And I don't understand why people don't just get it. I mean, it's very obvious a lot of times, the things that are right in front of their face and they don't see it. So yeah, I guess it would be Ross Geller and Sherlock Holmes would be my fictional characters.
All right, so a recent favorite I absolutely love is Beth Harmon from Queen's Gambit.
Oh, yes.
That show was so good.
Yep. It's funny though. I've heard a lot of people, I watched a lot of, or read a lot of reviews of people giving her character shit for that episode that she kind of lets loose and drinks and kind of like breaks from her character, which you could say is a weird way of kind of disintegrating to 7. But in that regard though, I think that the viewer can't help but root for that moment for her because of how much she was so controlled for so long. So in that way, what we would idealize, how do you say that word? Idealize? Yeah. The way that we would idealize the perfection of what she can do was actually her prison. Yeah. And the worst and most unhealthy way. She didn't become the healthiest version of that side of herself until the end. And so that's something that, which to be fair, I haven't actually seen the end. I never saw the last episode.
What?
I know. For some reason, it just like, I never watched it and I don't know how it happened. So we can't go into it too much. Don't spoil it. But
everybody dies.
It's always what happens. But yeah, and I think that there's so many things about that show that I loved though. And very much, Sherlock vibes for sure.
Yeah. I loved how they portrayed the visualization of her working through all the problems with the chessboards on the ceiling.
Mind Palace.
Oh my God. I love that. I remember when I used to, back when I was doing software development, and I would get really excited about a project. And I would literally go to sleep coding things in my head the same way she was doing that with the chessboard. And I would wake up the next morning early and go into work so that I could like get all the stuff out of my head onto, into the computer as quickly as possible before I lost it. So I can totally relate to that.
Yeah. No, I don't know if I guess I do that. I've done that with music before. There's not a lot that I've been able to visualize in my head, but I also don't think I've had a lot of problems with, I think I've talked about this in the past, but with math and not being able to visualize numbers.
Oh.
And I can't, that's my biggest problem with math is that I can't count in my head, like physically can't do it. And so, because as soon as I do, all the numbers jumble up and get backwards.
Right.
So I've never really processed it that much, but I've wondered if maybe I'm affected in other ways in the same way.
You know, it's weird. The only other INTJ that I know also has that.
Really?
Yeah. Do you visualize music at all? Because I do.
How do you visualize it?
So I used to do show choir. And so I did a lot of, more choir type music and reading parts and singing parts. But even before I could really read music, which I can't at this point. That was a thing. A quick tangent here. My ear was so good that I tried to learn how to read music and learn how to play the piano by reading music. And I remember my professor who was teaching me piano at the time, he had me try to read and like play it out. And, and I wasn't getting it. He's like, here, it goes like this. And then he played it out. And then as soon as I heard him play it, I sat down and played it right back to him. And he was like, okay, I'm never playing anything for you ever again. Yep. And the crazy thing is, like, I was obsessed with music theory. There was this advanced music theory class. I don't even know how I got into it, but it was like they combined music theory 1 and 2 into one semester. Yeah. And I took it and got the second highest grade on the final. And the only person who beat me was like a professional guitar teacher. Wow. And because I was obsessed. Yeah. But even with like that part of it, I was still really lazy in executing on it, like and like learning how to read the music, because I had grown up doing everything by ear and I relied on that. And so it was like, it didn't seem worth the effort, even though I really wanted to like get really proficient at reading music and being able to play, because I know that especially with piano, being able to sit down and actually look at a piece and play it out, I would love to be able to do that, but I can't to this day because I never pushed through and actually learned how to play.
Well, so the flip side of that is I can't read sheet music. I never have. And, but I've learned everything by ear. So similar to you. Yeah. So I don't visualize music, but I hear music constantly, whether it's silent or not. So whenever I'm thinking about a song, I can visualize in the sense of like audibly visualize. I don't know how to, I don't know what that means. I don't know how to say it, but like I can imagine it in my head audibly and fill in all of the parts. Yeah. Yeah. I do that too. So whenever I sit down to write music for this podcast, I play 4 chords and all of a sudden I hear all the other things. And so then I just start trying to find the things that I'm looking for that fit what's in my head. Okay. So I do that.
I guess to answer your question, how I visualize it is it's almost like a moving wave. Like I can see where I need to hit certain notes. And so when I'm
like Guitar Hero?
Kinda.
Yeah.
Kinda.
Well, obviously not waves, but it comes at you and you know when to hit your points.
Well, like when I'm singing a piece that I mean, I haven't done this in so long, so probably is not this way anymore. But like when I need to hit different notes, I see them in my head. I don't know how to explain it. Like I see the jumps, like the intervals between everything.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. I'm like that.
Okay, yeah,
yeah, I do that too.
And it helps me remember what I'm doing because I'm visualizing these intervals jumping around while I'm singing.
That makes sense. So in some ways, I guess it is similar to
Beth Harmon.
Queen's Gambit, yeah. Okay.
And another thing I love about this is she's one of the few well-portrayed fives that are female.
Yes.
Like
that's always everybody's complaint online, actually.
Gosh. Yeah.
Is when I was looking online trying to get other ideas for this episode and like some that maybe I had forgotten about. That was something that really struck me, how much everybody was like, I wish there were more female fives portrayed in movies, which I mean, there should be more female blank portrayed in movies, but definitely fives.
Yeah. So the interesting thing, I don't know if I've told you this or not, but I think like 75% of our audience is female. Oh, which is really cool. And it also makes sense because what we're doing is focusing specifically on fives, and there aren't a ton of resources like that. And I feel if I were to guess, I would say female fives probably crave that more because there's a lot less portrayal and a lot less resources that really like help them understand themselves. That's just a guess. I don't know.
We do get a lot of responses for the episodes that are all a lot more female than male.
Yeah, which I love
which is great. Yeah,
because
you have to listen to 2 guys talk for an hour. Yeah, no, it's good. I love it.
So that actually brings up another 5 that I really like, and that's and I was really surprised that they made her this way for this iteration, but MJ from the new Spider-Man.
Yes.
Yeah. The Marvel Spider-Man.
Yeah.
She's
nice.
totally a 5.
Yeah.
And I love it because like she just sits back all the time. She's smarter than everybody else, and she observes everything.
Yeah.
And
the first movie, like, she barely talked.
Yeah, but it's like super sarcastic, and like that's totally me in high school.
I loved her. I was like,
Yes.
"Yep, that's I would be friends with you or hate you."
Yes.
It depends.
Yeah, I guess it does depend. No, we'd probably be friends. It depends on how. I guess it depends on how willing she would be to be friends. But I'd be like, "You're cool. We can hang."
Yeah, I feel like 5s are weird like that though. Sometimes they're like cats; they don't really want to get along with other cats.
Yeah,
and then sometimes. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, now that I think about it, like it's interesting how we have this community of 5s that we're building, and everyone in there, I'm like, I would totally hang out with you,
right?
But I've also run into a lot of 5s where I'm like, you are obnoxious, and I think actually it's made way worse because I can see myself in them, and I can see the obnoxious parts of me in them, and the things that I don't like about myself, and that's probably why I look at them. I'm like.
I get that.
Go away.
Yeah, I definitely judge myself really harshly all the time and get on my own nerves. Like having to listen to this podcast and edit it over and over again.
That's why I make you do that.
Yeah, I constantly am just like, God, I hate myself. Shut up, Cody. What are you talking about?
Yep, because we never know enough. We're never good enough. We're never quite competent enough, you know?
Yeah. Well, and
or eloquent enough. You know?
Yeah. I think of way better ways to say things when I'm editing.
Yep.
I'm like, can I just
100%.
overdub this? I can just punch in.
I'm like, you thought this episode was great. Wait till you hear the episode that was in my head right after this episode, because it's 1,000 times better.
Oh, the conversations we've had when we hit stop.
Yeah, no.
You know what I mean? We had a couple episodes ago, we stayed and talked until like 4 a.m. and had another 2 episodes worth of conversations because we'd had too much wine that night.
I was definitely hungover the next day.
Oh, I was too. It was rough. But we had, at least our drunk selves thought they were good conversations. We might have recorded it.
That's a good point.
And
yeah.
listened back and also thought we were idiots.
I was just talking about all this stuff.
What?
I don't know.
I'm gonna laugh at that later.
Oh man.
Yeah, no, it's I never really thought about MJ being a 5, but it's completely true. And it's interesting too, because I don't know, what would Peter Parker be in that? Because he's kind of anxious, but then he's also kind of not.
Yeah, I don't know what Peter Parker would. I haven't thought a lot about that on the Enneagram. I know that like Myers-Briggs, he's a 4. I'm sorry. That's the opposite. I know that Myers-Briggs, he's an INFP.
Yeah.
And so I could see him as he's just really helpful. Is he a 2?
2-wing 1?
Yeah, I could see that. A 2-wing 1.
Or a 9-wing 1? No, 2-wing 1.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
Having said that, though, it makes sense because I actually think that the new version of Peter Parker and MJ don't go together at all. I don't think that they're compatible, and if they stay together in Marvel somehow, it doesn't make any sense. Because I feel like that he would drive her nuts because he drives me nuts.
Yeah,
and I like Spider-Man.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know. So I think that's, and him with his friend and their like geeky selves, and then it's her trying to be in the middle of that. If you think about just those personalities in real life, I would hate that. I would absolutely hate that in real life.
Yeah.
So, but definitely settled on she's probably a 5.
I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Jump in our community and tell us if you disagree with us, because I'm all for debating this.
Yeah. We have a thread going on Fictional Fives, so we can just update it with.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we do. Man, it's been so fun.
I did not initially know any fictional 5s. I had not looked any up. And so after doing some Googling, I found that my favorite Disney princess for most of my life was an Enneagram 5. So Belle from Beauty and the Beast, she is just fabulous. She's bookish. She's insatiably curious. She never quite fit in. She always had her nose stuck in a book. She was isolated, just she and her dad, but I'm sure that she loved that. She had her books, and she loved her fictional Prince Charmings over Gaston. And oh, the library. Oh, I just remember the first time seeing that library, and I thought, girl, you just got it made. She was so genuine, and she must have had a strong wing for it, because when she needed to make her true emotions known, she could totally do it. And she solved the problem. Her dad was going to be imprisoned by this terrible beast, or she could take his place. And as an Enneagram 5, she's like, well, I can totally just be inside a cell, and I'm sure eventually I could ask for books, and he'll totally let me have some. So yeah, Enneagram 5, Belle, she's fabulous.
So that actually is a good segue into my favorite Marvel character, who is a 5. Actually, so Spider-Man overall is probably my favorite just because of the sentimental reasons. Like, he was my first real superhero. I was into Spider-Man, and Batman were my two when I was a kid.
Yeah. I can't remember if it was Spider-Man or X-Men I loved first, but
I wasn't allowed to watch X-Men.
That's weird.
Yeah. It's a conservative religious thing.
They didn't want you to be brainwashed by the
mutants. They just there were certain buzzwords.
They're like, there's too many tones of racism and segregation in here. We don't want you to be brainwased into being
Socialism
progressive.
Right.
You showed them. That really worked.
So Spider-Man was really the first superhero cartoon that I watched, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Probably same here.
Yeah. I also wasn't allowed to watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles either because of the word mutant. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, that's true though. When I was a kid, there were multiple people that I knew who couldn't watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, X-Men. They were the same people who couldn't watch Harry Potter. I'm like, how are mutants and magic the same?
Yeah, I have no idea. So Spider-Man is my favorite for sentimental reasons. But my favorite character, as far as the one that I relate to the most, is Doctor Strange.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stephen Strange.
And the reason why, the thing that I love about the character that I kind of idealize is that he can essentially know whatever he needs to know. Right? So like an Endgame or Infinity War, right? He can play out all these scenarios, infinite scenarios, until and actually go through time. And
this is what happens when a 5 becomes
everything.
A god.
Right. Yes, exactly.
He was all of a sudden omniscient.
I know. I can know anything. You mean I can actually theorize something and see how it plays out, and then rewind and tweak it and see how it plays out, and do that at a trillion times in 15 minutes? Hell yeah, let's do that. I would do that with everything.
I will say this. He's one of my favorite characters, even from the comics, but I feel and Doctor Strange was one of my favorite Marvel movies. I don't feel like he got the origin story he deserved. I feel like he got there so fast that you're killing me with that stand.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I feel like he got there so fast that I was like, man, I really wanted a better arc for him. Because he just all of a sudden knew everything. And I'm like,
yeah,
you didn't
fair.
struggle enough. You literally lost everything that you worked your entire life for. There should have been more mourning, because we know now that Marvel knows how to mourn.
Yeah.
They know grief. And so I feel like it was just too lighthearted for him. And because he's such a complex character. And Benedict Cumberbatch is amazing for that. I mean, nobody else could play that character. So, it's really...
Do you think he's a 5 since he keeps playing these 5 roles?
Ooh, I don't know. Because he also played Imitation Game.
Yes, I was just about to say that, yeah.
Yeah, maybe he is. When I've heard him in interviews and stuff, he definitely kind of sounds like one.
I could see him.
So maybe he is a 5.
Yeah, he's
Benedict, if you listen to this episode, if you're listening to this podcast, let us know.
Jump into our community and let us know if you're a 5.
So Doctor Strange, all right, check off the list. He's a 5. We could stay in the Marvel world for a little bit. Bruce Banner.
I don't think Bruce is a 5.
Yeah, a lot of people think that he is. I don't think that he's a 5, but he's super intellectual, obviously, and he's really good at what he does, but he doesn't cherish the knowledge that he has. He cares much more about he might be a 9. If you think about what he grew into as both Hulk Banner, the Banner Hulk, and how much he has this affinity and love for the people in his life, and has come to, when he finally come to grips with both sides of himself, and he loved to spend time with people and tell stories, and he loved to have this like warm connection with people. Could be a 9-wing 1-wing 9.
If he were a 5, I don't think he would feel bad about the stuff the Hulk does the way that he that he
That's
does.
absolutely true, because I wouldn't feel bad.
I wouldn't either. I'm like, dude, it was the other guy. It wasn't me.
I say that now in real life.
No, right?
That was Hyde. I'm Jekyll.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really funny.
So I don't know if he's a 9 necessarily, but I don't think he's a 5.
He gives me 9 vibes. He probably isn't a 9, but I know 9s in my life that are, and have known 9s, and have, you know, some of those people have done podcasts and done things. They're 9s, and you just think of he gives me that warm, fuzzy vibe that 9s do.
You know what? I feel like we should have prefaced this whole conversation with. We're not Enneagram experts.
Yeah, no.
So we're not qualified to.
We're literally
really
just talking of our. We're having an opinion. This is an opinion piece. This is.
So take this all with a grain of salt, if you will.
And don't get mad. Feel free to comment and tell us what you think. You can tell us we're wrong. I'll be fine with it.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with that.
I don't claim to be right here. We are literally. I just wrote down I quickly wrote a list of things down right before we started, and was like, maybe these people are 5s, and we'll talk about it.
Who else in Marvel do you think's a 5?
Okay, you ready for this?
I'm ready. Hit me.
Okay, we're going deep.
Okay.
Tony Stark.
I don't know about that one.
I know. Everybody says that.
If he's a 5, he's an extroverted 5.
Sure. I disagree, though. I don't think he's extroverted.
You don't think he's extroverted?
Speaking as someone who's seen all 23 movies multiple times.
You are more of a Marvel nerd than I am, yeah.
All right, so I wrote down some notes here. You ready for this?
Yeah, let's do it.
Most of the series, he overindulges in wildly unhealthy behaviors and activities, trying to cope with life and trauma. So he has a full regression into 7, which happens in Iron Man 2 at his birthday. But at his healthiest, he loves to improve systems, his suit over and over again, multiple iterations.
Yeah.
He tinkers around, constantly working in his workshop. His favorite place is his like downstairs workshop where no one can get in. He locks everyone out.
That's true.
Even Pepper could not get in there.
Right.
And that's a parallel even to at the end when he has a family and he still has a space that he hides from everyone, and only he can access that.
That's true.
But at his healthiest, he grows, and even during that time, he tinkers and he goes way too far, getting too obsessive with it, forgetting all things about life in his trauma. And at his lowest point in Iron Man 2, and eventually leads into the second Avengers movie, which is Age of Ultron. So he tinkers so much that he accidentally creates an omniscient and almost omnipotent villain of Ultron, but then quickly realizing his fault and his shortcomings, and then creates the exact opposite side of that coin with Vision.
Okay.
So he has that kind of thing going, and then grows into and kind of peaks at his healthiest state when he kind of was growing into that when he starts mentoring Peter, being the teacher, being this person that loves to impart knowledge and then impart gifts that he's worked onto Peter, but still stays detached in the way that his dad left him with that trauma. Then becomes a good husband and father, but even then still can't help but get away from, I think he becomes like a healthier 5, which leans into the 8 qualities. But at the end is so sure of himself, stops doubting, and is so sure of himself and what he needs to do that he even sacrifices his life for it.
Okay. Counter argument.
Yeah, go.
I'm not saying you're wrong, but I could also see him being an 8.
Yeah.
Because at his unhealthiest, he withdraws and he does go into this. He's just, obviously he's a highly intelligent person,
right?
Regardless. But he's also never had a trouble making decisions. So Tony, so 5s, when we're not integrating towards an 8, we often overanalyze everything, and it causes inaction.
Yeah, he had those moments.
But I feel like that's not the norm for him. The norm for him is he can make decisions really quickly, and he can direct people, and he can delegate things, and he can do all this stuff.
That's true.
Right? So he's operating from at his kind of like normal level. He's operating from an 8. And when he disintegrates into a 5. When he integrates, 8s integrate to 2. So if you think about his progression towards caring for other people and learning how to serve other people, that's where he ends up to me, because he made the ultimate sacrifice for once caring for other people. And if you bring in the whole, like, you know, with Pepper, where she gives him that gift and it's like proof that Tony Stark finally has a heart, you know?
Yeah.
That to me is a great visual example of him integrating over to a 2.
I mean, yeah, it could go either way. It's funny that I see it that way as through the filter of a 5 and see that he becomes, because I feel like even with his family, they mean everything to him, but I still feel this like level of detachment that might just be me projecting.
Oh, that's a good point.
And
we
so
see who we want to see.
Yeah. Feel the whole thing. Just imagine it. But I don't know. Yeah, that's a good point. All right, cool. So there's the 2 arguments. Feel free to blow us up in the community for this. I'm okay with it. As long as we're talking Marvel, I'll debate with you all day. It doesn't even matter.
The one thing I will say is it's hard for me to debate a lot of this stuff because you have a much better memory than I do, like a long-term memory.
Only about Marvel, though.
Well, I mean, like I'm specifically around like shows and movies and things like that.
Yeah, I do. It's weird for me.
It's hazy. I watch so much. I know you have too, but we watch things in a different way.
Sure. And I do have this weird thing where I remember everything I've watched.
I don't have that.
Like so much so that like when we're watching, like
I've forgotten more of what I've watched than I remember.
Yeah. Well, and we like even when we were watching House, which you have to imagine back then was 22 episodes per season.
Yeah.
Way longer. And I still remember as soon as an episode starts, I'm like, oh, this one's good because this and this and this is going to happen. And like, I know exactly when it's about to happen and what's about to, you know, and I'll be like, look, watch this.
See, I
drive Madison insane because of that.
I can rewatch stuff and still like,
it's like experiencing it for the
yeah,
first time.
Yeah, it's kind of an awesome thing.
No, I don't do that. Sadly, that is something that I'm robbed of by remembering everything.
Like we're rewatching The Expanse right now. Actually, Amy's watching it for the first time, and which I love. It's one of my favorite sci-fis. Huh. And have you watched it? Oh, it's so good.
The poster has made me want to watch it many times.
Oh, it's so good.
It looks really cool.
It's so good. It is, to me, the most realistic portrayal of what a future would look like based on current circumstances.
Is it post-apocalyptic?
No, it's like, I think it's 200 to 300 years in the future, somewhere around in there.
Oh.
Where we have essentially started colonizing the rest of the solar system. So we've made it out to Mars, and so we have a colony on Mars that's been there for a while that we've gone to war with. And then we've got the belt, so the outer planets, the moons around the outer planets, and then people living on like large asteroids and different space stations, like large space stations in the belt, mining the asteroid belt. The thing that
it's like the oil rigs out in the ocean.
Well, yeah, the thing that I love about it is they did a really great job of like saying, okay, let's look at the current state of humanity and extrapolate out.
Okay.
And basically take the same kind of themes and dynamics and move them forward a couple of 100 years and what that would look like when you bring in the complexity of people living on different worlds. And so and the first season is really interesting because they have all these mixed genres where like part of it almost feels like a film noir because one of the characters is like a detective. And on the station he's on, whenever they're showing like that part of the story with him, it feels like a film noir.
Okay.
And then you've got everything happening on Earth, and it's like a political thriller. And then you've got the people who are out in the belt doing their thing, and it feels like a space odyssey. But it all is really cohesive, and I thought they'd done a brilliant job of it. And just the way that the story moves forward, where you think you know what the Expanse means, and then you find out what the Expanse means. And so it's just, it's so interesting to me. I really love it. It's probably my favorite space themed series, I would say.
Wow.
With a close second of Battlestar Galactica.
Which I've still never seen.
It's so good. Most of it.
The old one, isn't there a remake?
Yeah. I'm talking about the new one. I tried watching the old one. It's hard. I have a hard time watching old stuff.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
I mean, I would go as far as to say, and I know people might like murder me for this, but I have a hard time watching the old Star Wars movies.
I can see that. Yeah. Did you watch them as a kid?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I
can watch them for that reason that I watched them when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But I mean, even as a kid, I was like, these people cannot act. I think when I was like 7, I was like, Daddy, I don't believe them. They're not real. The effects in the end were terrible. So, I mean, because I rewatched them. My dad made me rewatch 4, 5, and 6 when 1, 2, and 3 came out. So I was a kid when those came out.
Okay.
But yeah,
I think I watched them around that time too.
and then watched them again when
I watched them with Redneck Dan.
Oh,
Yeah.
he's going to be like a weird character that comes up in random conversations.
I don't think he listens to the show because he's not a 5, but
Aw.
if you listen, buddy, shout out to you.
I rewatched all of the first 6 again when 7, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 came out.
Okay. You rewatched the first 6?
Yeah.
I can't go back to the original trilogy, man.
When 7 came out. When 7 came out, I rewatched the first 6, and I hated every second of 4, 5, and 6.
4, 5, and 6, really?
Yeah. Well, 6 wasn't that bad. 4 is the worst. 4 is definitely the worst.
Worse than 1, 2, and 3, you thought?
Yeah. I didn't mind 1, 2,
Ooh.
and 3 as much.
I need to go back and try them again.
Yeah, because 1, 2, and 3 is kind of fun, actually. And I watched them in the order they came out in, not in chronological order.
Oh, here's a question for you.
Yeah.
Now, I was going to say is Darth Vader a 5, but I don't
No,
think that makes sense.
He's absolutely not a 5.
Well, I was thinking back to Anakin
Yeah, he's not a 5.
when he was tinkering with stuff.
Oh, well, yeah, but he's too emotional.
They changed the character of Anakin.
But I
Right.
mean, even all the way through to Darth Vader, he's still, even Darth Vader's emotional.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. I need to go back and watch those.
Yeah. Again, I remember it all.
Right.
I've only seen it twice in my entire life.
I feel like I'm a combination of two. I want to say that I'm a lot like Zoe in Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, but I'm also like Diane Nguyen from BoJack Horseman. Kind of if you merged those two characters, I feel like I'm a lot like both of them. Now, I don't know if Diane is really a 5, but I empathize with her, and I think I also empathize with Zoe. So they're just a little quirky, a little bit absent-minded, a little bit focused, a little bit unfocused, and maybe just a little bit strange and weird, and it's okay, and that's what I think is best about being a 5, is being quirky and fun and weird and different, but all in its own little package that's uniquely you. That's what I would say anyway.
All right, let's shift gears here because there's a character. I couldn't keep watching the show because it was so scary close to what was going on inside of my head at like my darkest times.
Is this anime?
No, it's not anime.
Oh, okay.
No, we'll get to that later.
I didn't know where we were going. I have to say, we thought with this was going to be a shorter episode.
We always find things to talk
I
about.
know, yeah. We could talk for hours anyway. All right, so what is it?
So it's Elliot, the main character from Mr. Robot.
Oh,
Have you watched that?
I've seen pieces.
Oh, man. Especially in the beginning. And
Actually, maybe I haven't because I remember it as being kind of like a silly show.
oh, God, no.
So it's not that.
Oh, you need to watch it.
What's the premise?
It's brilliant.
Okay. What's his character like?
So his character is essentially a savant computer programmer who
Ooh, okay.
works at a cybersecurity company.
Okay.
Who is, I'll just say, someone comes into his life
Mm-hmm.
who sort of takes advantage of his mental health state
Oh.
and tries to get him to basically destroy all the credit card companies.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
But
Is it serious though? Like, is it well done? This isn't a show that's like on
it's
TBS or
no,
anything,
it's
is it?
it's really well done. And
What was it on?
I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
I don't remember. What is the guy's name? The guy who in Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh yeah, it's him.
Yeah, that dude. And then
What is his name?
Christian Slater is another character, and then
Hate Christian Slater.
so the inner monologue that this guy has, it's so cynical, but it's this weird mix of cynicism and knowing that he could do something about it and like fighting that, but it's a losing battle.
Right.
And just watching him sort of deteriorate in this mental health wise, deteriorate in the state, it was too spot on for me. Like I don't think I ever got to the mental health place that he was at, but the dark, cynical, I want to burn the world down place, and I could probably figure out a way to do it. Like there were times when I got there and it was not pretty.
I'm gonna have to watch it. I'm kind of a snob about movies or TV shows that are meant to be gritty and dark, but they don't really ever get there because
Right.
they're still for TV. And so if they don't really cross that line of being like actually dark and intense and being willing to push the boundaries of what they're supposed to be allowed to do, then I don't really get there because I live in real life and that's
Right.
too real. So it needs to be like real life.
No, I get you. And granted, it's been a long time since I watched the show.
Yeah.
And I was in a completely different headspace when I watched it, where I was kind of starting to sink back into this dark period.
Gotcha.
And so I don't know how it would look to me now in the lens that I have right now.
Like when you turn the lights on in a bar.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's terrible.
Yeah,
now.
maybe it is. I have no idea. I just remember thinking, this guy is inside my head and I need to stop watching this.
I mean, we all know that he can act. He won an Oscar for it. So I would be willing to watch it. That actually kind of is a perfect segue into one of my favorite shows, though. And even with everything that I just said, a show that pushes the boundaries way beyond what they should have been allowed to do and was cut off way before its time should have been. And it's the show Hannibal.
Oh, yeah. I never watched that.
On NBC. And to think that this show was ever on a major network blows my mind. It is so good and it's beautiful. Like the way that they interweave and make just absolute art out of somebody just completely dismembering somebody and putting them together in different pieces and making it beautiful or making you 100% believe that they're eating people and looks very gourmet and beautiful. Everything about it's a work. Every shot is a work of art. And for that, Brian Fuller forever has my respect as the director and writer of that show. And it's one of the main shows that I will forever wish would come back and might. It's a weird thing. Maybe it'll come back, but Mads Mikkelsen's Hannibal Lecter is the ultimate five to me. And it is my version of the ultimate five. Someone who has literally no boundaries and no limitations on what they would or wouldn't do to protect themselves or to manipulate somebody else for their own enjoyment. This show is nuts. So you're talking about somebody getting in somebody's head and making them do something. Mm-hmm. That's essentially the premise. And that's what he does to Will Graham. And so it's this whole thing. I don't want to spoil it because, Joe, you really need to watch this show.
Okay.
I would watch it with you. We can watch it together. I would actually love that. Actually, that'd be so fun. Because everybody I watch it with, nobody actually gets why I love this show.
We need to hang out more not doing podcast stuff, I think.
We keep talking about it. Maybe when we get this first season.
Yeah, once we're done recording season 1,
we can record season 2 ahead of time and actually have time to do things and be human beings. But I mean, that Hannibal Lecter, I mean, he's like agile and he's cunning, but he's just charming enough that he wins over the people but in a weird way though, I'm like, how in the world did they not think like the whole time that because this is a prequel to like Silence of the Lambs version of Hannibal Lecter. So he's still a practicing psychologist. And it's like the whole time, all this shit keeps happening around him and no one suspects him. And I'm like, it's obviously him. Who else in your life? Like, come on. And he
it's kind of like Dexter.
Yeah. Which I was going to get to that one. But with Hannibal, he facilitates connection and emotion almost believable, but really not. And so you only believe that the people who felt like he had a connection with them believed it, not that you believe he actually had a connection. So that's the only way if that makes sense. Like you think that they believed it, but you don't believe it because it's obvious that he doesn't. And so it's the most well thought out version of Hannibal. And I'm really, really angry that NBC owns, or CBS, one of them owns the rights to Clarice Starling's character. That's why they have that new show Clarice on TV right now. They wouldn't let Brian Fuller and that team have it because they were going to go into the Silence of the Lambs for that next season, and then they couldn't do it. So, and they still can technically, but then it had like a cult following of all these people, which, by the way, if you're a Hannibal fan, we are definitely friends. Talk about that in the comments with me or in the community, please. Because there's a bunch of people who love that show, and anybody who's seen it really loves it.
Okay, so I don't know how many people will agree with this or not, but one of my favorite fives is actually Dexter Morgan from the show Dexter. He was not a nice guy, but I've just always really felt this weird attachment to him, that his inner monologue sort of like resonated. And it's so funny. I can't say this to many people because they look at me sideways. I'm like, yeah, everything but the serial killer part. But just something about his struggle with like social mores and norms. He can be perceived as a normal functioning person. I mean, so much so that no one knew his secret, but it took a lot of practice and it took a lot of observation and learning and how to interact in different social settings. He is very objective in the way that he sees the world, and clearly he takes that a little too far. He's able to form these, they are emotional connections. They've been compartmentalized to such an extreme that he doesn't view them as feelings or recognize them as emotions. And I do think that that's something that we struggle with as fives, is being able to understand and realize that we do have feelings. We just need to figure out how they show up for us versus how they might appear to show up for other people.
There's one that I love because I feel like his name just completely sums up his fiveness.
Okay.
So if you watch the show Fringe, have you watched that?
Fringe?
Fringe.
I have not.
Oh man, I love that show.
I know. You've been trying to tell me about it for like 6 years, maybe longer.
So there's this character called the Observer.
No, not a 5. No way.
And he just shows up, at different points in history to observe things and take down notes.
Yeah.
And, you get to know him more in the series and learn that his name is September. And
what a terrible name. I would stick with the Observer.
Well, they call him the Observer because they don't know who he is.
Right.
And he has the name that he does. Well, it's a whole thing you don't want to get into.
Yeah.
I love that. I always remember relating to this character who was kind of like a tangential character.
Mm-hmm.
But I always thought how much I would love to just be able to do that, be able to pick periods of time and just go back and observe them and see what it was actually like.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's one of the things that drives me crazy, is that I can intellectualize things and I can put myself in a place and I can come up with these theories about what something is like. But until I can actually go test that hypothesis and actually experience it and see what it's like, I can never actually really know. And that drives me nuts. And that's one of the reasons why stuff like politics has always driven me crazy, because it's so hard to know what's actually true. And stuff like, I can be interested in certain things in history, but I've never really enjoyed a lot of historical things, except for things that when there are theories that change our perception of history, then I'm all about it. So I totally, I'm going to alienate like half of our audience here, but I totally got into like the whole like ancient alien, ancient civilization thing, just, if for no other reason as like a fun thought experiment, and went way down that rabbit hole. And like, that was really fun. And thinking through like,
was this last summer?
Since last summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember this time.
and so it was, like that kind of stuff that I love, but anything that like is a new take or helps us think about like reframe things in history, I love that. But Amy, she's super into, my wife, she's super into like period pieces and loves all this historical things. And if it's already happened, I don't really care. Like, I don't really care to go back and like relive it or understand it. Like, I'd rather focus on like, okay, what can the future be like?
Yeah.
And how can, and like, how can we make that happen?
That's true. Yeah.
Or not make it happen, depending on the scenario of if I'm feeling super dystopian at the moment, or maybe I want the dystopia. I don't know. I'm still, the jury's still out on that one. But I like this character, the Observer.
Mm-hmm.
And so the other one, and I know that you don't watch anime, and I won't hold that against you.
Hang on, before we go to this,
Okay.
I need to interject because there's something that goes perfectly with what you just said.
Okay, do it.
Devs.
Oh yeah,
Devs.
I would. If anyone's a 5 out of those characters, I think it's the main.
The guy?
No,
or the girl?
Yeah, the main character girl person. I don't know. I kind of binged that show and then forgot about it. To be honest.
Actually, I would say the one who might actually be a 5 is Allison Pill's character.
I don't know who that is.
She's the one who's Nick Offerman's character's right-hand woman and also lover.
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
She's probably the 5, actually. Because she's like a sociopathic character in that show.
Okay.
So she's probably a 5.
I don't remember.
She's almost the villain. So
Okay.
she actually is the villain.
Okay. I don't really remember it that well.
Oh, my God. I only watched it recently, so I remember very well. And on that note, it's really strange to say, but when they go back, it builds up to it so long that when they go back and see a very particular, I won't ruin it for people who haven't seen it. You guys should definitely go watch Devs on FX. It's amazing.
It's worth it. It's good.
But there's a moment where they actually see and they figured out how to materialize in front of them a moment from the past in history. That's the climactic moment of history to see if it's actually real. Do you remember what moment I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And I got goosebumps. It's almost like I was watching the history a long time ago.
Right.
And I got almost emotional, which is weird because I don't feel an emotional connection to that moment. But it was weird because my brain, I was so invested in the show. They pulled me in so hard with the intellectual parts of it that I was invested emotionally. And when I saw that, it's like I was also watching history in front of me. But it was so weird.
But that's the thing is that what's compelling about it is the machine that they built literally allowed you to go back and figure out the truth of anything. Like you could go back through time essentially. And so the world is open to you. I think that's part of my issue with history is that somewhere, as much as I try to fool myself, I know that the history that I'm learning about is a version of history.
Right.
There's no and the degree of truth in there is
relative.
And it's all about who wins, right? That's who writes history. And so I can't be confident in it. Right. And so if I can't be confident that what I'm looking at is true, and there's no, like, there are methods that historians have to come up with kind of like a degree of certainty.
Right. But
I feel like it's a lot different than the more scientific method, because you can actually test things and stuff like that. There's only so much we can know about the past.
Yeah.
At this point, where and that drives me crazy. So I'm not as interested in it because I know that I can never really know for sure. So I'd rather focus on like the stuff that I can figure out,
Sure. Yeah. Instead of watching Downton Abbey, I'm going to watch Game of Thrones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So next, actually, that's a good segue into, since we're talking about Nick Offerman.
Yeah.
I wanted to get your opinion. Do you think that Ron Swanson is a 5?
His constant need to not have anybody know where he is or have any of his information, and his distrust of the government, but then also working in the government. I don't know. His definitely, even at his most emotional, he's lacks emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible. And that would make sense with his relationship with April and how it was so perfect in its lack of relationship.
April's definitely a 5.
Yeah.
And I love her character.
Yeah.
I've thought about this a lot.
Okay.
And I'm not convinced Ron is a 5.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I think it's actually a similar case to what we talked about earlier with Tony Stark, where I actually think Ron's might be an 8. And he's just a really, really unhealthy 8 for most of the show. And that's actually his character arc, is his growth. So to me, that's actually his character arc. The growth that he experienced is integrating. So coming away from that 5, that like paranoid, isolatory place, and moving more into a 2 where he's a caretaker and he's caring for the family that he has.
You're making the same argument for Ron Swanson and Tony Stark.
I know it's weird, but I kind of wonder about that. And actually, I would say that it's probably, to me, it's a stronger argument for Ron Swanson than it is for Tony Stark.
Okay. That's fair. You've also watched Parks and Rec more than you've watched all 23 movies.
That is true. Yeah.
I could see that. I don't know. I have a hard time though, because what if fives are capable of feeling things.
Yeah, I know.
So just because,
but we're not caretakers.
Definitely not caretakers. We expect everybody to take care of themselves.
And
we're totally fine with people wanting to take care of us.
Right. And the other thing about Ron is kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier with Tony, is I don't see him overthinking things. He's a very decisive person. It's very black and white with him. And there's not this complexity. He doesn't complexify things. He simplifies everything and
complexify.
Sure, we're gonna go with it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Whereas like 5s, we can take one thing and just extrapolate it out and make it more and more complex. And
and 5 wing 6 is different than 5 wing 4 in that way, because 5 wing 6 struggles with the idea of extrapolating so far that then it's like, what is the meaning of anything? And struggles with that, whereas 4 is, like we've said, bathe in it.
I kind of like that.
Yeah. That also might be, I mean, I can actually use Ron Swanson as a perfect example to say Tony Stark might actually be a 5-wing 6. And it's because you say he's decisive, but there's an entire period of time where, because of the revelation of aliens and gods, he struggles with everything he's ever known and spends about 3 movies trying to figure out what he believes in again, and having the trauma, and that the trauma of both the New York attack and also just having to redefine what it means, and him trying to like grasp at straws and develop all these things. And then he has an overreaction with the Sokovia Accords, trying to create, essentially he wanted to create a barrier around Earth to protect everybody from it, because essentially that means he's protecting himself and he's protecting his world from everything outside of it, because he has an overreaction to everything he doesn't know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Tries to, and then he dives very, very deep into everything defensive and all of the defensive technology he can create, which ultimately creates Ultron.
That's a really good point, in that 5s, we tend to focus on what we don't know.
Right.
And Tony Stark does that. Okay, I think I could buy that Tony is a 5. I think that Ron is not a 5.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I don't think Ron's a 5. I've never really thought Ron's a 5. In the first season, you think he's a 5 because he comes across so distant and cold. Right. And April does too, but even April's story arc never really changes. Like she grows warmer, and she grows a little bit like, okay, she cares a lot about Andy, but she never really changes. That's a 5 thing.
I love her character so
5s
much.
develop, but they don't really change.
I don't know if I agree with that, because I've changed a lot.
I've changed a lot. Well, 5s are more consistent. I'll say that. Maybe even take the change thing out that I said.
Sure.
But even through our change, we're still kind of unwavering in our consistency about a certain core aspect of that, what makes us who we are.
I mean, I think you could say that about pretty much any type except for maybe a 9.
I don't know. 6s swing a lot of different directions. 7s are all over the place.
Well, I mean, if
1s, I would say, are pretty much like 5s.
But if you kind of come back to what the Enneagram is, where you're looking at what is our core desire and our core fear, that's going to be consistent across. I know for me, the reason why a lot of people think that I'm not a 5 and I'm a 9 or something is because of how I have very purposefully, intentionally, and intensely reprogrammed my subconscious mind to negate the things of being a 5 that don't serve me well. And that's a conversation for a whole other time. Yeah. But that's
little teaser there.
Yeah, that's what I've done. And so, I get it. I think it's funny when people try to type me, but it is what it is.
I think the fictional Enneagram 5 that I relate most to is Dr. Gregory House from House MD. I started watching the show when I was probably 15 or 16 years old. It was kind of a family show that we all sat down and watched, and my parents and my sister would all sit back and exclaim over how he talked to people or how he treated people and how he was so messed up and all this stuff. And I just remember sitting back thinking, no, I get it. He's got all these emotions and things that he's dealing with, and he doesn't know how to deal with them, and he doesn't want to deal with them. So instead, he channels all of that frustration, all of that emotion into fixing problems. He saves people's lives. He figures out these crazy things that are wrong with the human body, and then he makes it all better. And who cares if he's a jerk while he does it, because he's healing people. And I can remember even at 15 years old, just relating to not being able to deal with my own junk, but wanting so desperately to help other people and fix other people and not let the emotions and not let the feelings get in the way of that. And I think that's the first time I ever really felt that I could relate to somebody on that kind of a level.
There was a couple more that I wanted to get to here before we head out. And one that I love, and I have to bring up because I know, Cody, I know you're not an anime fan, but Death Note is...
I knew this was going to come up in conversation.
Death Note is it gave me a whole new respect for the genre. I was already a fan and I'd watched a ton of anime, and then I watched Death Note and I said, this might be the most brilliant piece of fiction that I've read, just in terms of the way they play mind games with each other, the way that they are trying to outsmart each other in a way. Like, I was continually blown away by how smart these characters were. And it's just so clever. The cat and mouse game that they play, the deductive reasoning, like the logic that they have. I absolutely love this series. So L, who's the main character, who's kind of the I don't know if I call him an anti-hero. He's like the main character, but he's kind of, I mean, he's not the antagonist. He's like the protagonist, but he's doing something evil. So the premise of the show.
So it's like Dexter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the premise of the show is there's this high school student, and there's essentially a demon who gives him, well, he doesn't actually give it to him. He drops it into the human world to see what happens. But this is notebook. And there are certain rules around it. But essentially you write someone's name in it and they die. And so this high school student is hyper intelligent, and he finds the notebook, picks it up, discovers what it is. But instead of just writing people's names in it, he thinks through, okay, how can I do this so I won't get caught? And so then he's
definitely a 5 if he already knew who he wanted to write down in the book.
Well, no, he's selecting targets based on people that he finds who are like criminals and things like that.
This is really like Dexter.
Yeah, it really is. But then like the world's greatest detective catches his scent and goes through this process of figuring out who he is. And
but how? If he's writing his name in a book?
Exactly. It's really clever. That's what I'm saying.
Is there an English version of this?
No, you just deal with the subtitles. I hate the dubs.
It's already hard for me to watch cartoons. It's even harder to watch it in a different language.
I mean,
I get too like separated from the story. That's always been my issue with anime.
Okay, I guess that's fair.
I think there is an English version of Death Note.
Do not watch the live action version. That's terrible.
Yeah. No, I've already heard many things about it.
But this show is brilliant. I love the whole thing. Like, it's just this like intellectual porn, essentially. Like, it just, my brain was firing in all cylinders watching this. I loved it. Okay. So the next one, I'm really on the fence on this one because this is my favorite movie, and it's mainly my favorite movie because
I know who this
because
is.
I didn't watch a lot of stuff like when I was really young. I grew up in West Virginia.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a lot of access to things. But my aunt had this movie on VHS and I watched it 100 times. Anytime I went over to her house, this is what I watched. And it's The Princess Bride.
Yeah.
And it's this cult classic, super clever. I just love the way it's written. I love everything about it. It's so witty and unexpected. And I can still, even though I can quote the whole thing, I can still watch it and enjoy it to this day.
Sure.
I love it. You've seen it, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think Wesley's a 5? Because I've gone back and forth on this with some people on like Instagram and stuff, and I feel like there's a case to be made that he is, but I'm not necessarily convinced.
Well, so I'm not going to have a strong enough opinion to have a conversation about it because though I've seen this movie, I'll be honest, it's a lot like Monty Python and the Holy Grail to me in the sense that I only watch it with friends when I'm drunk.
Okay.
So
fair enough.
Why do you think he's a 5? Because I'm having a hard time seeing it, actually.
Okay. So let's walk through this. So at the beginning, he is a man of very few words. He observes the farmer's daughter from a distance. And the only way she knows that he loves him is because when she asks for something, he says, "as you wish." And that's the only words that really he says to her.
It's true.
So he's playing this sort of intellectual game and seeing if she can catch on to it.
Okay.
Right. And that's sort of what, like, if you look into like, sexuality of a 5, like it's a very intellectualized thing. And so that's kind of clue number 1. And clue number 2 is, he goes off, he's on the ship, gets captured by pirates. How he makes the most of that situation is he uses it as a opportunity to learn everything that he can. So he learns from the pirate. He ends up becoming, friends. He ends up becoming the Dread Pirate Roberts because of that. He becomes an amazing fencer, swordsmith, or not swordsmith, but he's great with the art of fencing, right? So, and then he goes through this, like through the show, every single kind of scene is basically to show how smart he is. So when he duels with Inigo, it's all about outsmarting him, showing him like he studied more. When he duels with Fezzik, who's the giant, he basically outmaneuvers him, outsmarts him because he knows that he can't overpower him with it, like physically. And then when he sits down with Vicini to have a battle of the wits, he outsmarts him, and it's this whole like thing, right? He's always the smartest person in the room.
Got it. Yeah.
And I can see the case to be made for this. I also don't know because I feel like he's kind of sentimental, but so if he's a 5, he's probably like me in that he's like a 5-wing 4 and maybe a social subtype like I am.
Probably.
And so I see a lot of myself in that character, and it's probably why I love the movie so much. And that's why I'm leaning towards him being a 5. But there's also some things that he doesn't show some of the more, like he seems more of an optimist than I feel like most 5s would be in a lot of situations.
Yep.
Although, now that I'm thinking of it, when they bring him back to life and they're sitting on top of the castle wall and they're, looking over, and he's like asking, the first thing he does is he takes an account of like, okay, what are our resources? What are we up against? All right. And then he's like, yeah, this is not going to work. Like he's like, we're going to call it a day. Right. So I don't know, maybe, when he is, one of the things that he also has is just kind of this indomitable will. And I wonder if that's integrating to an 8 maybe. And that's where that's coming through. I'm not sure.
I don't know. Let us know in the community if you agree with Josiah on this.
So the fictional character that I most identify with would be the K2SO droid from Rogue One. If you've ever seen the movie, that droid plays a very prominent role in the group, and you can tell from the droid's demeanor that they are very analytical, very much all about facts, data, not so much concerned about feelings or emotions, and it's all about sarcastic, dry humor in almost every conversation that they're a part of. And they are very pessimistic, but in a truthful way. It's not a glass half empty versus glass half full. It is what it is.
Okay, so probably the last one because it's getting way too late. I have to get up in the morning.
Yeah. This episode lasted way longer than I thought it would.
I don't know if a lot of people have watched this show, but it's so good.
If you haven't, this is a plug for it because it's amazing.
I love this show.
And I don't know if it's coming back.
I don't know either. So how do we say this? I guess we can kind of...
we're
marking everything as explicit, so we can just say it, I guess.
We can say what we want.
Okay. This show is called The End of the Fucking World.
Yes.
And
the first season
amazing.
Is incredible. It's genius. Oh my God. It's so good.
The funny thing is...
Hang on, we got to say, the premise of the show...
Yeah, go ahead.
...is that there's this kid, James, who takes a liking, at least what you think of, is that you in the trailer, the reveal is it looks like he takes a liking to this girl who also takes a liking to him. But the way that he takes a liking to the girl is that he wants to kill her. He thinks that she'll be his first true murder.
Because he's a psychopath.
And he's struggling with not actually feeling anything or knowing anything about anything outside of that small world of being trapped inside of torment and detachment.
And I don't know if you and I don't think we've talked about
We haven't talked about the show at all.
Okay.
But so it's kind of funny, but I don't really ever feel like I tap into or am that in touch with the primal side of myself, the primal self. But there's moments when I watch things like that, where especially the raw, like when you're in his mind and you see the things that he sees, it like triggers the primal self for me. And I'm reminded that that's there. Like I agree. I not agree with, but I understand that.
Yeah.
And it's really strange. And I immediately, and what's really strange is within that primal self, I mean, it's probably something in my amygdala, but I immediately feel emotionless. I immediately cut off and I'm like into this place where I'm
you just start mirroring it, kind of?
I don't know if it's mirroring it because I definitely feel it without having to see it, but it brings me to that place where it's almost, well, it's like a fight or flight reaction almost, right? Where it's like, I see that moment, or I feel that moment, I see that happening, and then I feel the moment immediately following, and I'm just in there. I'm in the moment 100%. So like for some people, it like really troubles them or bothers them to see things like that. And for me, I feel it's weird to say, but I feel more alive in some of those moments where they're more graphic and more intense. Not because I want to kill somebody or be in those moments, but it's because there's something about that moment that triggers something in me that I never am in touch with because I'm constantly suppressing it. I might have to edit that out later.
Hey, it's Josiah, and I wanted to say thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this episode and you're the type of person who likes helping others, would you do us a favor and share it with other people like you? If you found value in this conversation, they will too. I also want to give a special thanks to our community members who shared their voice with us in this episode. If anything in this conversation has resonated with you, or if you have any further thoughts or questions, I want to invite you to join our community of other people like you and continue the conversation at Enneagram5.com.